Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the session on Scope 3 on the journey together and how to drive, how supplier engagement can drive Scope 3 emission reductions. Um, we see people joining in. Thank you for taking some time out. We have a very diverse group of panel today to walk you through this very exciting topic. Let's kick it off. I'll share my screen and yeah, take you on the journey that we have been preparing to share with you all. Perfect. So before we go further, just wanted to take a quick note. I think you all who have been joining this session might have seen this or heard about this. Let's follow the antitrust laws and avoid any discussions around that could get us in trouble. So let's stay focused on the agenda. Let's focus on the topic and have a very fruitful and great engagement session. For today, as I said, we have a very diverse panel with us. You will hear from John O'Reilly, who is heading procurement sustainability at BAT, Nolly Mangolele, who is the head of procurement Sub-Saharan Africa at BAT, Gauri Angrish, she's leading climate and water program in global sustainable sourcing at Colgate-Palmolive, and Amarish Pradhan from Schneider Electric, who is the general manager for sustainable procurement team. And lastly, myself, Jaimin Shetwala from sustainability and risk team at Bayer. Moving on to what we have in store for you for today, we wanted to break this session down into two key themes. Scope 3 is a very broad topic, and particularly supplier engagement is also very broad. And we as group wanted to share from 4 different companies with very different backgrounds and industries. We wanted to share on these two broader themes. So one, how to engage with our suppliers, and then second, how to prepare procurement organization to do that. Let's start with the how to engage with suppliers, and there as well we try to broadly categorize these into 4 chapters. You'll hear different stories and how each company is doing this. We thought there is a common thread. We use different systems, we use different tools, but we all follow more or less a similar narrative and a story. And the story that you will hear about is to engage with your suppliers. Step 1 is always scoping, understanding where you want to engage, prioritizing which suppliers you want to talk to. Step 2, engaging with them, setting some expectations towards suppliers and some commitments. Step 3, assessing their maturity. So where do they stand on the climate journey? Step 4, taking the action based on what you have learned and heard so far. Step 1, we said, for a group who needs to, for today's session, we thought it's a no-brainer. This is like the basic that we all need to do. So having an understanding of Scope 3 emissions will be the key to start this entire journey. We thought let's zoom directly into engaging part, and there let's hear from Nolly how they do this at BAT.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamin. Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to share with you the journey at BAT on how we successfully engage our suppliers in our ESG objectives. So let me take you through what we've done so far and over the years. So we've always ran webinars, workshops, and some examples of it, we've ran supplier summits in countries like Bangladesh, USA, China, and South Africa. And for the purpose of this example, obviously, I will use the South Africa version of the ESG Summit to illustrate and share some of the learnings with you. In so doing, we plan to host the summit in South Africa in October 2024. And obviously, some of our suppliers are at different levels of maturity in their ESG journey. So we sought to first demystify the ESG buzzwords. And we shared a lot of materials throughout the years with the suppliers, but obviously also as a build-up to the successful ESG summit, we then shared some materials like some sustainability reporting and any material that we thought would be good to get them well versed with some of the ESG latest concepts. And then on the day of the summit, which was a one-day summit, we hosted our valued suppliers in Johannesburg. And in so doing, we also welcomed some of the specialists in the industry. What was the purpose of that? We wanted these specialists to inspire ESG for our suppliers, and also to just illustrate there's a wide pool of practitioners in the market that they can actually pull on to get to accelerate progress in ESG. So our specialists then inspired ESG for most of our suppliers. At the same time, we also partnered with a knowledge partner who on the day we sought to share some of the sustainability fundamentals, and those would include how do you as an organization build an ESG roadmap? How do you embark on making sure you have effective sustainability reporting? And with that, we then got all our suppliers to then at least know some of the basic fundamentals of how one can manage ESG within an organization, and also get the buy-in from the leadership of their company. And obviously, we needed to have what was the one big step change in how we engage our suppliers. Not only were we at BAT telling them what we're doing to inspire ESG, but we actually encouraged them and partnered with them to collaborate with us to share what they're doing in their journey to foster sustainable practices in their value chain. And so one of the key benefit of the summit that we did, we invited our suppliers to participate in what we call a case study. So these are real life case studies where we went through some live cases where they interact with the cases where they will have to create a sustainable strategy, and also be familiar with scenarios where things can go wrong if an organization does not practice good sustainability ways in their ways of working. And in so doing, we did inspire ownership from the suppliers. There was basic understanding on why we all need to do this, because we cannot go on this journey and accelerate progress on our own. And obviously the summit was a success. And the question was, is it only just about, we've done all the work before with the suppliers, and we've also had the event on the day, but what's next after the event? So through partnerships with our suppliers, we then fostered to say, let's agree, form some focus groups. So we continue to work with the suppliers with the aim of building capability, sharing learnings, and also agreeing on some initiatives that we can do together in a way of fostering a value chain that is sustainable in our practices. So I can sit here today and say we are on a good journey with our suppliers. They understand why ESG. They understand why we're not going to do it individually. We're going to do it collaboratively. And where we need to collaborate as co-opetition, we do it. So that's the way we're doing it in BAT. So in a nutshell, what is the message that I want to leave for you is that there is value in engaging suppliers to accelerate progress in ESG. There is value in learning from other people on how they're doing it. And BAT is actually committed to partnering with our suppliers in what we do. And John will share later in the day on how we do it. So BAT is committed to building capabilities together with our suppliers and share learnings amongst our suppliers. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Noli. Let's also hear about an engagement approach which is slightly different, but also you will find a lot of commonalities from Schneider Electric, and this is something Amrish will share with us.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, now.
Yep.
Okay, great. So at Schneider Electric, we committed to be net zero across our value chain by 2050, which means it includes our emissions coming from the operations, emissions from the supply chain, and then emissions from our customer side. Now, as a first stage of this project, we have launched our supplier decarbonization project. We call it here at the Zero Carbon Project. The aim of this project is to reduce the scope 1 and scope 2 emission intensity on an average by 50% from our top 1,000 suppliers by 2025. Now, these suppliers, they come from probably more than 50 countries and supplying different types of products to us. At an initial stage, with a maturity assessment, we came to know that 70% of our suppliers are new to the decarbonization, and two-thirds of them belong to small and medium scale industries. That posed a huge challenge for us. Then we launched a comprehensive supplier support framework to help our suppliers. At a very basic level, we started with the capacity building. We launched a series of webinars spanned over 6 to 7 months, 2 sessions every week to cater all the time zones. Now, these sessions address those basic requirements, starting with what are the greenhouse gases, how do the supplier can compute the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, and where to find the emission factors, etc. We are we try to invite some of our suppliers who are at a very advanced stage of their decarbonization journey to share their experience. Starting recorded sessions and the training materials were made available to our supplier partners over a digital platform, what we call the Zygo Hub. We also launched a emission calculator to calculate the scope 1 and scope 2 emission. So suppliers with bare minimum, the primary data, like primary activity data, energy consumption, fuel consumption, if they put it, then easily they can find out the emissions. It's very user friendly. Lately, around 2023, we launched an end-to-end decarbonization tool, which we call it as Zygo Activate. The main features of this tool is to calculate the scope 1, scope 2 emission at the beginning, propose a target to the suppliers, and derive a decarbonization roadmap to help the suppliers. The user has the options to customize their target and roadmap. And at the end, with the PIN code and the zip code of the supplier location, the tool can predict who are the nearby solution providers who can help the supplier partners to implement those decarbonization action plans. We did launch a decarbonization playbook, which was developed with the support of our internal experts who helped our own scope 1, scope 2 emission reduction. And this playbook has hundreds simple solutions to improve the operational efficiencies and thereby decarbonization of their operations. This can be used with a very bare minimum knowledge around the subject, and this worked a lot in the favor of the program. Renewable energy is an essential part of the decarbonization. We launched a massive training for our suppliers to educate them the topics of power purchase agreement, virtual power purchase agreement, energy attribute certificate, on-site solar, off-site solar, etc. How to form a cohort, what are the legal risk, financial risk are involved in those cases. And these sessions are spanned over 2 years. Each of these session has 9 modules. And we also other than the webinars, we also started conducting workshops, in-person workshop for our supplier partners. The main objective of these workshops are to call the suppliers, the internal decarbonization experts, and the external solution providers together to discuss and identify the solutions which can help our supplier partners in accelerating their decarbonization journey. We also have a pool of experts who support the suppliers both on site and off site. So they go to the supplier premises, do a quick uh, energy audit, identify the solutions, and then follow up with the suppliers for the action plan closures. Now, all this what I have explained so far is provided at free of cost to our supplier partners. Our objective was to reduce or even eliminate the barrier between our suppliers and their decarbonization. We do incentivize our suppliers in terms of the business relationship. We do a lot of recognitions. We have a global award program. So if they won the award, so there are a lot of benefits which are given it to them. And we are integrating more and more of the suppliers' performance in our day-to-day business decision making. So all in all, my one-line message will be, during this journey, we need to stand together with the suppliers and provide hand-in-hand support as much as we can to accelerate this journey. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Amresh. Really, really interesting. Now, looking at the themes that we wanted to cover, the next theme on our plate would be going a bit towards the assessment of the climate maturity of suppliers. So once we engage, once we know how much emissions they have, we also want to understand, based on what data we get from them, where do they stand. So let me share how we do this at Bayer. So at Bayer, we have this ladder or mountain model, whatever fits well, which is a 5-step maturity model that we apply to categorize or segment our suppliers based on their decarbonization maturity. And for these 5, even to simplify one level further, we say a supplier has an advanced decarbonization rating or a supplier without an advanced decarbonization rating. So the green or the gray part. In general, you can add many more criteria and aspects to make it more detailed, more holistic, more complex. But we, in our decarbonization efforts at Bayer, we have realized, let's start simple. Let's have clear expectations, and then as we progress towards our ambitions and goals, these naturally will intensify. The expectations towards the supplier will also intensify. Our aim is to see all of our suppliers move more and more towards the right-hand side and more on the top side of the ladder. And for that, we use several tools to engage. We also move our procurement organization and by setting up KPIs, indicators that can help us to take the right actions. Without going more into the details, I think most important aspect that I wanted to highlight is there are several such models available in the outside world. You will see so many maturity models applied by different companies. Our one line takeaway would be, keep it simple, be more focused, and help your suppliers to move a little more on the right hand side. I think that is what we also want to promote in the supply chain. Once we know this supplier climate maturity, it triggers a lot of actions. One of the action that we want to do is decarbonize. And after this, let me pass it on to Gauri, who will explain to us how they do this at Colgate-Palmolive.
Thank you, Jaimin. Hi, everyone. I'll give you a little insight on how we are looking at decarbonization action and encouraging that with our suppliers at Colgate-Palmolive. Our first step in looking at decarbonization action is assessing data, what we are collecting data for, and how we are then using that data to help with decarbonization action. So when we start assessing data, we have 2 primary focuses. One is data for the current materials that we're already sourcing from our suppliers. And then the second one is to engage with our suppliers to ask them if they have any lower carbon versions of the materials that we source. And if they do, then ask them for relevant data for that as well. So step one is, what data do we collect? Our, in an ideal situation, we would like to get product carbon footprints for all the materials that we source from suppliers, or also for the low carbon opportunities that they put our way. But we do understand that different suppliers are at different levels of maturity, and they may or may not have the capability of sharing product carbon footprints. So if they don't have PCFs available, then we've created a simple emission factor survey, which is essentially 10 questions that ask the supplier about the production process, about their feedstock, about where the feedstock is coming from, if they have renewable energy, basically questions that don't require climate expertise to answer. And once we receive the responses for the survey, we create sort of like a hybrid product carbon footprint, which is not at all, not as good as maybe the supplier provided PCF, but it is definitely better than the databases, global databases that we use. So that's in terms of the data we collect from the suppliers. Next slide, please, Chairman. Then it comes to how do we use the data that we collect. So I'll firstly talk about the data that we collect for current materials and then talk about the low carbon alternatives. So in current materials, we use the data in two different ways. First is getting a real and accurate understanding of our scope 3 category 1 data, or our purchase goods and services data. So I'll explain this by giving you two examples. We For one specific material, material X, we had an industry average that we were using from a database, and that industry average was 4.08 kgs of CO2 per kg of the material. When we collected the PCF from our suppliers for that material, we actually realized that the emission factor was 1.3 kgs of CO2 per kg of the material. So there was a vast variance between the industry average we were using from a database versus the primary data we were receiving from suppliers. And therefore, this helps us get a better understanding of what our actual emissions are. Now, if we accumulate that together, last year in 2024, we collected a bunch of product carbon footprints from our suppliers. And when we accumulated all that data, we saw that there was a variance of 7,900 tons of carbon dioxide when we compared the data that we're getting from our industry average database versus the data coming from primary data from suppliers. So this just enhances the reason of collecting primary data to get an accurate understanding of exactly what your emissions are in your scope 3 category 1. The second way we use the data for current materials is driving more meaningful supplier engagement. So this chart that you see on the right-hand side of the slide is, once we receive the primary data, we try to break it up into the different stages or the process stages of the production of that material. And we start understanding where is the emission actually coming from. As you can see in this chart, you'll see that some of the emissions are coming from the supplier sites, while some of the emissions are coming from the upstream suppliers of our tier 1 suppliers. So this starts then giving us a little bit of insight in terms of how we can usefully engage with the suppliers and tell them, okay, if you want to look at decarbonizing this material, then maybe you should look at your own sites in terms of renewable energy or process efficiency, which could lead to about a 30+% of reduction. Or you should engage with your upstream suppliers to look at a change in feedstock or sourcing efficiency, which could also give a 20 to 30% emission reduction to this material. This is something which we've just started doing. Next slide, please. Then when it comes to low carbon alternatives, how we use this data is again in two ways. The first one is to assess, once we receive the product carbon footprint, and if it's a good enough reduction and it's something that we're interested in maybe sourcing, we start assessing if this material is viable for us to start purchasing instead of the existing material. For this, we look at many different factors. For example, material equivalency. Is there a need for requalification? Is there any cost change for us to move to this lower carbon alternative? And also importantly, is this lower carbon alternative available at a scale? So understanding the viability of the material beyond climate carbon reduction. The second aspect we're starting to work on is to estimate the cost of reduction once we receive this data. For this, we're trying to create models for decarbonization levers that are linked to the different process map stages, like you saw on the last slide, and then trying to estimate the cost of each of these identified decarbonization levers and trying to do it for specific geographies so that we understand what the cost of reduction would be for each material. And that becomes useful information for our procurement teams to engage further with the suppliers.
Thank you, Gauri. With this, we also want to now turn towards how do we prepare the procurement organization. So you saw a lot of tools and ways how all four of us, think about supplier engagements. But if we now think about preparing the procurement organization, there are four key themes that we want to cover. Step one would be creating a good governance. Second, thinking about how you can upskill and educate your procurement teams. Third, how do you digitalize your data? How do you make it available and also create workflows around it? And lastly, probably one of the most important ones, integrating this into procurement decision making. Let's start with the first one. So creating governance structure. And for that, Amrish will share how they do this at Schneider Electric.
Thanks, Jamin. So, Schneider Electric's procurement organization is fairly complex and matrix type. And I would imagine, an organization at our scale will be more or less will have similar procurement structure. We have procurement colleagues coming from the regions, from the business units, from the categories, etc. Now, to ensure that the supplier decarbonization project is implemented uniformly across the procurement organization, we have a solid governance structure in place. The performance and progress of this project is being monitored and tracked by our leadership, starting with our chief procurement officer up to at the buyers and supplier performance level. For the deployment in the overall organization structure, we have a global deployment lead, that's myself. Then we have a pool of experts whom we call internally sustainable procurement experts, or in a more of a simplistic term, these are the subject matter experts in the various decarbonization topics. They are based across globe. They're in Mexico, US, Europe, China, and India. Now, this pool of experts, they simplify the complex terminology of the decarbonization and explain to the suppliers in a local language in their time zone. So they work as a technical consultant for our own internal team as well as our suppliers. Like I was explaining earlier, they do visit suppliers, they do desktop support. So both on-site and online supports, they provide throughout the project life cycle. The thousands suppliers who are part of this project, they come from 12 procurement teams. Now the procurement VP of each team is accountable for the performance of this project. They have delegated or designated one person from each team to coordinate with our central team for the project implementation. Now, every week I publish the report, and then I have 30 minutes call with each of this team separately to talk about what has been the progress so far, what are the challenges, what is the action plan for the subsequent weeks. Now, still each spoke need to manage a supplier ranging from 30 to 180. It's too much for one person. So we have a further support, which we call Schneider Supplier Leader. These are the colleagues who handle around 1 to 3 suppliers in their scope. And for any concerns from the suppliers, they are the window person. Supplier can reach out to them at any point of time, and they will try to provide a level one support. If they have any issues, concerns, they will come back to SPOC or to our central functions. Having said that, I mean, in the whole governance, anybody can interact with everybody. So there is no restrictions. They can reach out, email, phone calls, Teams meetings, everything is possible. Now, all this governance structure helped us a lot in achieving our journey. So with this help, we are able to achieve 40% scope 1, scope 2 emission intensity reduction on an average from the top 1,000 suppliers by end of 2024. We have 1 year to go to achieve 10 additional percentage to reach 50% of our target. So my message here in one line, to ensure that this supplier decarbonization is embedded at each and every stage of the supplier life cycle, we need to have a solid governance in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Samresh. Taking this journey a little bit further towards how to prepare and educate and upskill our procurement teams, let me share how we do this at Bayer. So at Bayer, we apply this approach of 70-20-10. I think it's a very common methodology that you might have heard or learned about. 70% of learning happens when you do things on the job, 20% happens when you are listening in, exchanging with your peers and learning from others, and 10% through formal trainings. And that's how we also put a lot of our efforts as well. So a lot of our efforts has been developing how we can, engage people more and more on the job. And for that, we have set up a communities of practice. This concept of community of practice is supposed to be bringing more and more passionate and right skilled people together, independent of the org structures, R lines, and complex setup. Rather focus more on collaborating and developing solutions, but also at the same time implementing them. And we have developed at Bayer several of those communities of practice. With this, we have been able to ramp up a lot of our efforts and engage and upskill a lot of our colleagues who love the sustainability themes and are passionate to drive them. The second piece is all about engagement. This is what we do right now as well. We also leverage a lot of sustainable procurement pledge initiatives. We are also sharing our learnings internally, but also externally through TFS talks and similar different forums. At the same time, we also understand the importance of formal training. So we at Bayer have a platform where every Bayer employee have access to the learning opportunity. They can utilize that. And more importantly, we also utilize a lot of externally developed joint industry developed solutions such as TFS Academy, which is free of cost for us, but also for the suppliers to learn a lot about and upskill themselves on decarbonization. We also do a lot of ad hoc training, very specific subject matter expertise. And I think a combination of this is something that we continue to offer and helps our procurement organization to continue on the journey. Let's zoom into the third aspect, which is the digitalization. And for that, John will share how they do this at BAT.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. A real pleasure to be here today and to talk to you around how we work with suppliers. We have a program in BAT we call the Supplier Enablement Program. It's all about, very similar to what you heard from some of my colleagues here on the panel. It's where we look at some key criteria of capability of our supplier base and how we can focus to work with our supplier base to build their maturity, build their capability, and have impact. So when we look at the data points, it's all about, when we look at this thing, to say, you know, what you measure gets managed. So it's important that we've got good data. So when we look at data, in BAT, we have a one-stop shop supplier spend data called Beyond Spend, which links in also not just about spend data, but also information around our suppliers, including some elements around sustainability as well. Not only that, we have an annual program where we invite suppliers to submit into CDP. We do that because that's also a revalidation via a third party to see where suppliers are along the maturity of their journey. And also it gives us an understanding if they are at primary data stage, where we can take some of them emission factors out as well. But also with CDP, they raise the standard every year to consider multiple different legislations that are coming in as well. So it's a good opportunity to engage with suppliers via a third party to also drive training with the suppliers so they can build their capability across their organisation as well. And this feeds nicely from a data collection perspective, because it feeds into our one-stop shop, which is the Microsoft Sustainability Manager that we utilise across multiple facets. So when we collect the data, what do we do with it? We take the data out, we translate that into a scorecard, and it's a Power BI. We call it Source to Sustain. And in the climate world, we look at it and we can see from suppliers about where they are along the journey across these different metrics. The metrics that we talk about are very similar to what's been discussed today. We look at suppliers around how good is their reporting? Are they able to report scope 1, 2, and 3? Is it verified? Do they have what level of renewable energy across their organisation? Are they engaging with their suppliers? What level of primary data are they at or plan to be? Do they have SBTI? Do they have senior sponsorship within their organisation as well? So it's multifaceted as far as a list of metrics that gives us a position across our entire procurement function globally, so we can access that and embed that in our conversations with suppliers and look to understand on an annual basis that capability improvement and what we need to do together with our suppliers to build that capability. We had one example in Brazil where we saw one supplier didn't really have much of a roadmap around their scope 1 and 2. In our own operations, we're already carbon neutral there. So we set up workshops. We took the supplier in, we spent 2 days talking all about what we do in our scope 1, what we've done on scope 2 to think about generated power, green energy brought in as well, and just really sharing best practice so that the supplier came away with a roadmap. They could build a plan and understand how they're going to impact and reduce emissions. So it's a really powerful tool to make sure that we further deepen the relationship we've got with our suppliers across our procurement organisation so that we can drive impact and action. That means everyone's on a decarbonisation journey together. So this is just some screenshots you can see of that Power BI that we've got at the moment, which is a fantastic tool. And it helps us also build capability across our procurement function so that, again, in every relationship discussion we've got, we talk about sustainability as well. So if I was going to wrap it up with key messages, I'd say, look, it's all about capability, understanding the maturity of suppliers, but being in a position where you've got the right data that talks about meaningful action and progress the supplier can make so that you can reduce emissions. Because at the end of the day, we cannot do this in isolation. So this is working really well for us, really, really positive, and we can see a real strong glide path now about how we're going to reduce our emissions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. Let's hear from Gauri on how they embed these decisions that procurement experts need to take day in, day out, how they embed decarbonization there. What are the aspects that they consider? Over to you, Gauri.
Thank you, Jermaine. So when we look at embedding emissions in procurement decision-making, there are 2 aspects that we look at. The first is enabling procurement teams. And a lot of the panelists have spoken about some of the aspects mentioned here. The first one is climate education. So ensuring that we're educating the procurement teams about what decarbonization means, what our targets are, why is it essential for them to be engaging with our suppliers, and more importantly, providing them content to make their engagement with the suppliers more useful and targeted. The second one is not just digitizing, but also optimizing climate workflows. If our aim is to embed climate into procurement decision making, then we need to understand that procurement teams have a lot of KPIs that they're working with, and climate is only one of the many KPIs that they have to look at. So it's essential for us to optimize the workflows for them, so it becomes easier for them to integrate it in the engagement they need to do overall with the suppliers. Lastly, it's not just about providing clear KPIs, but also making sure that there is a trackable progress, which can not only help the procurement teams understand clearly what their targets are and how can they track their progress, but also helps us translate the actions being taken by the procurement teams into how we are faring across our journey, our net zero journey to achieve our net zero targets. So that's looking at enabling procurement teams. And then the second aspect, which we started working on, is enabling procurement processes. So in this case, first I'll talk about legal. We already have our climate expectations as a part of our supplier code of conduct. But now we're looking at including climate requirements as a part of our supplier contracts. And we won't be looking at it sort of like a one size fits all, but trying to map the supplier climate maturity, which we now understand for our priority suppliers, and understand which clauses we can add to those supplier contracts based on their maturities and capabilities across climate. The second one is RFPs, or requests for proposals, that our procurement teams do with the suppliers to understand which suppliers they're going to be working with, as well as different volume contributions that they'll have the suppliers committed to. Again, in this aspect, there are a lot of variables that procurement teams are looking at when they make these decisions. So our aim is to integrate climate or carbon as one of the many variables, so that the procurement teams can take a decision by co-prioritizing climate as among with the other variables that they're looking at. For this, what our aim is, all the data, the PCFs that we're collecting for the materials from the suppliers, we want to make those PCFs available to the procurement teams so that they can start assessing different suppliers for the same materials in terms of the carbon footprint that they will be providing for those materials, and use that as a part of their decision making. The last part is cost of carbon. Like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to understand what the ideal cost of carbon would be to decarbonize 1 ton of carbon, but at the same time get some variance in terms of what the cost of carbon could be for different materials. This will help, again, our procurement teams have a baseline to assess. So if they have opportunities that come from suppliers for lower carbon materials or decarbonization projects, they would have a baseline to understand and compare the opportunities to, and therefore help them enable the integration of climate into their procurement processes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Gauri. We are through the presentation. We already have quite a few questions. Let me stop sharing, and I think we can go around the list of questions. Thanks for, firstly, your attention, and also sharing your questions. Very, very interesting. I'll start with one of the fresh questions and one of the fresh presentation slide that Gauri covered. There was a question on product carbon footprints. So we have a question. It says, there are a lot of different PCF methodologies available in the market. So how do we make sure that the comparison between these PCFs is apple to apple?
Firstly, yes, totally. There are many methodologies, and sometimes suppliers even just give a number and nothing else. So I think one thing that we are looking at is the pact methodology. They have a very nice format which is created not just for mature suppliers that are sharing PCFs, but also if there are suppliers who are not mature and only can give answers to some production questions. They have a really good format. So it helps us receive the responses. And then again, we also have a third party that works with us, which helps us validate the responses that we're getting, which helps us a lot as well. The PAC methodology is provided by WBCSD, which is the World Business Council of Sustainable Development. So I would urge you to look at that.
Thanks, Ori. There was one more question, particularly towards you, Nolly, and I think you
Yeah.
already answered the comments, but I would really like you to share what were your biggest surprises from the supplier summit that you did in Africa.
Yeah, so I think first of all, obviously, when we had the summit in South Africa, like I mentioned, we had already had a few in the different geographical areas, right? So we also shared some learnings with them. So I think the biggest learning for us was the suppliers' enthusiasm, right, to come to the summit. So we actually got easy 98% of whoever we invited to come. So number one, that was the biggest surprise. And then the second thing I think was that we found out that actually our suppliers are already on some sort of an ESG journey within their business processes. What was then a surprise is that the level of uncoordination, right, to bring the message across of what they're doing and how to also do the sustainability reporting. So I think it varied from the ones that are early on in their maturity, they struggled with maybe the roadmap, which I think with the support of BAT, we're able to get them into small, small steps. But I think majority, most of the suppliers, especially in Africa, right, where it's a guideline sustainability, most people are doing something to improve their own value chain. So meaning in their own right, they're doing the right thing. So all we needed to do is how do we coordinate? How do we create impact, like John said? So we're starting to gather data within BAT to understand better about some of the areas of opportunity, work with our suppliers. And with that data, we are able to come up with some of the initiatives with the suppliers. In so doing, we will actually drive down and reduce our emissions going forward. So I think for us, the biggest surprise is how we have quickly, at the end of the summit, been able to keep along, right? The very same suppliers that we spoke to, and the conversation has become easier. The language is uniform now. We all understand each other. And yeah, with things like CDP, all of that, we're no longer struggling, right? Because everybody is in tune. What does it mean? Why do we do it? All of that. So I think for us, it's strictly a partnership, building capabilities with the suppliers. But at the same time, it's not only focused on big suppliers, right? We also have social audits, all of this that we do with our small suppliers and making sure that we all drive ethical business. So what we're doing there is we bring also our small, medium enterprises along. So that's for me in a nutshell, is to say everybody seems to be working in the same direction. We just needed to make sure that it works in a much more coordinated way.
Yeah, and I think if I may support as well, I think when we look at these events, it's not just us going on the stage and telling people what they need to do. We've done different events all over different geographies, like Nolly said. And what we always open up with is to talk about what we're doing as an organisation in them different geographies already, to show what we're doing on scope 1, what we're doing on scope 2, so we can share immediately of the business value of doing that. It makes good business sense, yeah. And then outside of that, we're always making sure that we bolt in workshops with suppliers to just really focus on education and making sure that we can focus in on where the concerns are or where the risk aversion is around being involved and having conversations in this space. That's I think, Nolly, demystifying is a very good terminology, yeah, because people are nervous. So I think we can only help each other if we talk more and more, and we try and simplify some of the language as well about how we work together and understand the capability of our suppliers of what they really need to do and demonstrate what we're doing as well. You know?
Thanks, Nolly. Thanks, John. We do have time potentially for one or maybe two questions. Let's see. I pass the mic to Amresh. I think there is an interesting question. How are your suppliers managing to reduce their scope 1 and 2 emissions? And what do you consider as the main challenge that they are facing in this process?
Okay, it's very interesting questions, and thanks for that. So, at a very basic level, we advise the suppliers to start with the energy efficiency. There are a lot of quick wins around this area depending on the maturity level of any company or our suppliers. So they can implement some of the quick fixes, realize the savings probably in terms of energy and also in terms of cost. That will give them a quick satisfaction to invest more on probably a, a longer projects, which will have obviously an return on investment. The next aspect is about investing on the electrification. Now, this may call for some kind of investment. It depends on the type of electrification, the scale of the project, and etc. And last but not least is on the renewable side. So renewable energy plays a very vital role in the decarbonization. If they have space on the rooftop or carport, they can depending on the geography across the globe. So if there is abundant availability of the solar, aspects, so they can invest the on-site solar, or they can go for off-site solar. So they can also source the renewable energy through the contractual instruments like PPA, VPPA, and also through ESCs. Now, the second part of the questions is, what are the challenges what we have? So very quickly, the challenges with the small and medium scale industries, one is about the know-how, the subject matter expertise, what we say. Second, availability of the resources at some point of time. And also the mindset is very important, because a lot of them think that these kind of aspects are always for the big companies and not for us. So then there are some regulatory challenges, varies from one region to other region, also contribute to the challenges. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Amresh. Really engaging and exciting session. Also, thanks to all the entire audience for sharing your questions, your thoughts in the chat. We really appreciate it. We know we couldn't answer all the questions live on stage, but as it is mentioned in the chat as well, do not hesitate reaching out to any of us. We would be happy to have an exchange and go deeper into any of the topics that you enjoyed or would like to learn more. With that, thank you so much. And yeah, we all see you in either in one of the next sessions or soon. Take care.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Lewis, the founder and CEO of Supplier Day. It's been a pleasure to support the Sustainable Procurement Pledge in producing World Sustainable Procurement Day for a third year in a row. So firstly, what makes SPP such a valuable partner? SPP isn't about ticking boxes. They're real pioneers in driving sustainability through collaboration. Their focus on transparency, measurable outcomes, and holding companies accountable sets them apart. By working together, we're not just talking about sustainability, we're putting it into action across our supply chains. And why is procurement a lever for change? Procurement is at the heart of every business. It shapes our supplier relationships, influences our environmental impact, and drives innovation. By reimagining procurement as a strategic, impactful function, we turn routine decisions into opportunities for positive transformation. Our partnership with SPP shows that when you combine robust supplier engagement with a clear sustainability vision, you create real competitive advantage. Together, we're proving that sustainable procurement isn't just a trend. It's the way forward for resilient, forward-thinking businesses. I'm looking forward to seeing how we all drive change at WSPD. Thank you for joining.